I saw a pale, gray hand pressing flat against the glass from the outside.
He was the nicest guy in the neighborhood. Every day at 4 p.m., I'd ride my bike to the end of the block, and we'd talk.
Think you're brave enough to handle what comes next? Prove it. Hit subscribe to Nightmare right now. Let's see how long you last.
You're driving down a long, dark road. The radio is playing quietly, the heater is humming, and the only thing illuminating the world ahead is the twin beams of your headlights. It feels like a safe, isolated bubble. But the terrifying truth is that you have no idea what, or who, is waiting for you just beyond the reach of those lights. Until it's too late to turn back. Here are 8 true scary stories involving unnerving encounters on the road at night. On the night of April 18, 2021, at around 7:40 p.m., an Australian man named Mitch Cooney was driving down the Hume Highway in Bardia. He was exhausted, returning from a racing event and just wanted to get home to the Gold Coast. The highway was dark, the kind of darkness where the world outside your windows just ceases to exist. He was cruising at nearly 60 miles per hour, towing a large toy hauler trailer behind his vehicle. At that speed, with that kind of weight behind you, stopping on a dime isn't an option. Suddenly, his headlights caught something in the middle of the road. It wasn't a kangaroo or a deer. It was a person. Mitch's heart hammered against his ribs as his brain processed the image in split seconds. It looked like a small child, maybe 6 or 7 years old, wearing a blue parka. The figure was just standing there in the darkness, right in the middle of the highway, seemingly trying to cross. Mitch gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Swerving or slamming on the brakes with a heavy trailer would have almost certainly caused the vehicle to jackknife and flip, likely killing everyone involved. He had no choice but to hold his line. Miraculously, he missed the figure by mere inches. As the child blurred past his window, a wave of nausea hit him. When you're a kid, you're taught that your house is the safest place in the world. It's where your parents are, it's where your bed is, and it's where you can hide from anything scary just by pulling the covers over your head. But what happens when the scary thing is already inside with you? What happens when you realize the locks on the doors are there to keep people out, but they do nothing to stop what's already in the room? We all have childhood memories that are a little fuzzy. Maybe you remember a toy you lost, or a scraped knee from falling off your bike. But some of us have memories that are sharp, memories of things we saw in the dark that we were told weren't real. We were told it was just our imagination, or a bad dream. But deep down, even decades later, we know what we saw. Here are 3 true stories from childhood that still make me sleep with the lights on. Music transitions to a lower, darker drone. Story 1. When I was 9 years old, I lived in a small, nondescript house with my mom and my younger sister, Emily. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind of place where you could ride your bike until the streetlights came on and nobody worried. But inside our house, things felt different. My mom always dismissed the noises. She'd say, "It's just an old house, honey. Old houses settle. They creak. It's normal." And for a while, I believed her. But there are house noises, the pop of a heater, the groan of a floorboard, and then there are sounds that feel deliberate. Sounds that feel like they have intelligence behind them. It started one night when I was having trouble sleeping. I was lying in bed, staring up at the plastic glow-in-the-dark stars I had stuck to my ceiling, trying to connect them into constellations. My room was small, just big enough for my twin bed, a dresser, and a wooden toy chest pushed against the wall near the window. I remember glancing over at the wall, watching the shadows of the tree branches outside dancing in the wind. It was soothing, hypnotic even. But then, my eyes drifted to the corner of the room, down low by the toy chest. There was a shadow there that didn't move. It wasn't a sharp shadow, just a dense, black mass pooled in the corner. I stared at it, my heart doing that little skip in my chest. I told myself it was just a pile of laundry I'd forgotten to put away, or maybe my giant stuffed bear had fallen over. I actually almost laughed at myself for being so jumpy. But then I blinked. And in the split second my eyes were closed, the shadow was gone. The corner was empty. The moonlight hit the floorboards clearly. There was no laundry, no bear. Just empty space. A wave of cold washed over me. It wasn't a draft, it was that internal chill that starts in your stomach and spreads out to your fingers. I pulled the blanket up over my head, squeezed my eyes shut, and forced myself to breathe until I fell asleep. The next morning, the sun was shining, and I felt silly. Ghosts aren't real, shadows are just tricks of the light. I got out of bed to get dressed for school, and that's when I saw it. My toy chest was wide open. I froze. I absolutely knew, that I had closed it the night before. My mom had a strict rule about keeping the room tidy, and she would yell if toys were spilling out. The lid was heavy, it didn't just pop open on its own. It looked like someone had been rummaging through it. I slammed it shut, my heart hammering, and didn't say a word to anyone. A few weeks later, things escalated. My little sister, Emily, who was only 5 at the time, walked into the kitchen while my mom was cooking dinner. She said it so casually, like she was talking about a cartoon she watched. "Mommy, I don't like the man in my closet." My mom didn't even look up from the stove. "Oh, sweetie, there's no man in your closet. You're just imagining things." But I looked at Emily. She wasn't playing. Her face was pale, and her eyes were wide and serious. She looked at me, and I saw genuine fear. "He whispers," she said quietly. "He stands in the closet and whispers, but I can't hear the words." That night, my mom did the whole routine, checked under the bed, opened the closet door to show it was just clothes, said a prayer. But she didn't check deep in the corners. Later that night, I woke up to a sound in my own room. It was a slow, rhythmic scratching. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It sounded like fingernails dragging across the hardwood floor. I was paralyzed. I lay there, rigid as a board, listening. The sound was moving. It started near the door and was slowly dragging its way toward my bed. I wanted to scream for my mom, but my throat was closed up tight. The sound stopped right next to my bed frame. I knew if I leaned over the edge and looked down, I would see a face staring up at me. So I didn't move. I lay there for hours, terrified, until exhaustion finally took over. In the morning, I built up the courage to look. Right there, in the varnish of the wood floor beside my bed, were 3 long, parallel scratches. They were fresh. The wood was raw and splintered. I ran to get my mom. I was hysterical, pointing at the marks. But instead of being scared, she got angry. She accused me of dragging the heavy dresser or playing with something sharp. She wouldn't listen when I told her I didn't do it. After that, the atmosphere in the house shifted. It felt heavy, oppressive. I started hearing the whispering too. It sounded like a radio left on static in another room, faint and unintelligible, coming from my closet. Emily started waking up screaming. She would point at the corner of her room, sobbing, "He's there. He's there." I never saw anyone, but the air in that corner felt freezing cold, and the hair on my arms would stand up straight. The breaking point for me happened in the dead of winter. I woke up suddenly, that feeling of being watched hitting me like a physical blow. I looked inside. The toy chest was closed. But the contents, Legos, action figures, stuffed animals, were scattered all over the floor in a violent radius, as if someone had picked up the chest and dumped it upside down before slamming it shut. I backed out of the room, ran out the front door, and waited on the porch until my mom's car pulled into the driveway. She blamed the cat. She blamed the wind. But years later, after we had moved out and I was in college, I brought it up over dinner. "Mom," I asked, "did you ever see anything in that house?" She went quiet. She put her fork down and looked at me. "Yes," she whispered. "Sometimes, I would wake up and see a shadow standing in my doorway. A man. I think he used to live there. She never told us because she was trying to protect us. But knowing that she saw him too, it validates every fear I had. It wasn't a nightmare. It wasn't an imagination. It was real. And sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I can still hear the sound of nails dragging across the floor. Story 2. Sound of wind howling outside. When I was 10, my mom remarried, and we moved into a new place. It was a step up, bigger house, nicer neighborhood, plenty of trees in the backyard. It felt like a fresh start. My room was at the end of a long hallway on the second floor. It had these big double windows overlooking the yard and a closet that was strangely deep, almost like a small room itself. I loved it. For exactly one day. The first night I slept there, I woke up around midnight. The house was dead silent, but I could hear a sound coming from my closet. It was a soft, rhythmic shuffling, like someone wearing a winter coat brushing against the wall. Swish, swish. I stared at the closet door, my heart pounding. I told myself it was the house settling. We've all done that, right? Rationalized away the fear. Then, the doorknob turned. It didn't open all the way. It just turned enough to unlatch, and the door shivered in its frame, like someone inside had gently bumped against it. I pulled the covers up to my nose and didn't move until sunrise. When I finally got up, the closet door was cracked open about 2 inches. I asked my mom if she had come in to check on me. She said no. She blamed the air vents. But it wasn't the vents. The activity ramped up quickly. A few nights later, I started hearing tapping on my window. Tap. 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 I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was a tree branch. But the next morning, I looked outside. There were no trees close enough to the house to hit my window. The nearest branch was 10 feet away. The tapping continued every night. It wasn't random, it had a rhythm. It sounded like a finger drumming on a table. One night, I gathered every ounce of courage I had and peeked out from under my blanket. Pressed against the glass, illuminated by the moonlight, was a hand. A pale, grayish hand, flat against the pane. It was on the outside. My room was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no ledge. For a person to be standing there, they would have to be hovering 20 feet in the air. I watched, paralyzed, as the hand slowly slid down the glass and disappeared into the darkness. I screamed for my parents. My mom came rushing in, but when I told her, she actually laughed. "You're dreaming, honey," she said. It was a night terror. Go back to sleep. My stepdad was even worse. He made jokes about it at breakfast. Did the ghost wash the windows while he was out there? He chuckled. But I noticed he started leaving the hallway light on at night. Maybe he wasn't as skeptical as he pretended. About a month later, my little brother, who was 4, started talking about the white lady. He slept in the room next to mine. He would tell us she came into his room and sat on the edge of his bed. She has black eyes, he said matter-of-factly. She stares at me. My blood ran cold. He didn't know about the hand I saw. He didn't know about the tapping. One night, I heard him screaming bloody murder. I ran into his room before my parents even woke up. He was curled in a ball under his sheets, shaking. She was here, he sobbed. She was standing by the door. I started sleeping with my head completely under the covers, creating a cocoon of safety. But the dream started. I would dream of a woman, unnaturally tall, wearing a tattered white dress. She would stand in the corner of my room, her head almost scraping the ceiling, whispering my name. Her voice sounded dry, like dead leaves skittering on pavement. And then came the night I will never forget. It was stormy outside. Thunder was shaking the house, and rain was lashing against the windows. I woke up because I heard a mechanical sound. Creak. I looked over. The lock on my window, the window I checked every single night, was slowly turning. I watched in horror as the latch clicked open. Then, the window began to slide upward. The rain blew in, soaking the curtains. And she climbed inside. It was the woman from my dreams. The white lady. But she didn't climb like a person. She didn't use her hands. She just floated through the opening. She was taller than the window frame. She had to duck her head to get in. Her skin was the color of chalk. Her hair was long, black, and stringy, dripping with water. And her eyes, they were just empty, black sockets. She didn't walk. She drifted across the floor toward my bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. She leaned over me, her face inches from mine. I could feel the cold radiating off her like an open freezer door. I smelled stagnant water and rot. She opened her mouth, revealing darkness, and whispered my name. That broke the paralysis. I screamed. I screamed so loud my throat tore. The light flicked on. My parents burst into the room. The room was empty. The window was closed and locked. The rain was beating against the glass from the outside. "What is wrong with you?" my stepdad yelled. "You're waking up the whole house." They were angry, but I saw the look on their faces. They were pale. They felt the cold in the room. My mom put me in therapy after that. She said I had an active imagination and anxiety. We lived there for 3 more years, and I was terrified every single night. My brother eventually stopped talking about the white lady, but I think he just learned that talking about her made the adults angry. I would still hear him crying softly at night, whispering, "Go away." Even now, as an adult living in a different state, I can't sleep with the closet door open. And when it storms, and the wind rattles the windows, I still find myself checking the locks, terrified that I'll see a pale hand pressing against the glass, waiting to come in. Story 3. Sound of distant traffic and birds, fading into silence. When I was 8 years old, my world was very small. It consisted of my house, my school, and the 3-block radius I was allowed to ride my bike in. I knew every sidewalk crack, every dog that barked behind a fence, and every neighbor's car. There was one house down the block that I particularly liked. It was a nice house with a manicured lawn and a long driveway. Every afternoon, around 4 p.m., an older man would be standing at the end of that driveway. He wore a fedora-style hat and a beige cardigan. He looked friendly, like a grandfather. He never stepped onto the sidewalk, and he never went into the street. He just stood right at the edge of his property line, watching the world go by. Whenever I rode my bike past him, he would wave and call out, "Afternoon, son. Bike's looking fast today." I'd slow down and wave back. "Hi." Over time, we developed a little routine. I'd stop my bike near the curb, keeping a safe distance like my mom taught me, and we'd chat. He was funny. He told me jokes about cats and dogs. He asked about school. But the weird thing was, he knew stuff I hadn't told him. One day he said, "How's your little brother feeling? Heard he had a fever." My brother did have a fever. I remember thinking, wow, news travels fast in the neighborhood. Another time he said, "Your dad get a new car. That blue sedan is a beauty." My dad had brought the new car home the night before. I figured the man must have seen it driving by. It seemed harmless. One day, I got a new bike. Bright red, with a shiny chrome bell. I was so proud of it. I rode down to show him. "That's a fine machine," he beamed. "One day, we should race to the corner." I laughed. "My mom says I can't race in the street." He smiled, a sad sort of smile. "Maybe one day." We talked for weeks. Then, abruptly, he stopped coming out. I rode by on a Tuesday. The driveway was empty. Wednesday, empty. Thursday, the curtains were drawn tight. I was worried. I thought maybe he was sick. A few days later, I saw a woman in the backyard of that house. I had never seen her before. She was older, wearing a gardening dress, watering some hydrangeas. I did something I was strictly forbidden to do. I looked both ways, checked for my mom's car, and rode my bike across the street, right up to the edge of the driveway. "Excuse me," I called out. The woman turned, looking surprised to see a kid standing there. She walked over to the gate. "Hello there. Can I help you?" "I was looking for the man," I said. "The man who stands in the driveway. Is he okay? He hasn't been out in a while." The woman looked confused. "What man?" "The man with the hat," I explained. "He wears a beige sweater. He's really nice. He tells me jokes. He said he wanted to race me." The color drained from the woman's face. She dropped her gardening shears. They clattered onto the pavement. "Did he?" She stammered. "Did he have a smile? A big smile?" "Yeah," I said. "And he knew about my new bike. And my brother." She wiped her hands on her dress, her breathing getting shallow. "Honey, that sounds like my husband, Harold." I smiled. "Oh, can you tell Harold I said hi?" She looked at me with eyes full of tears. "I can't do that, sweetie. Harold died last year. He had a heart attack right there in the driveway." I felt the ground drop out from under me. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I talked to him last week. He was right here." She shook her head slowly. "I live here alone. The house has been empty since it happened. I just moved back in to get it ready to sell." I didn't want to believe her. "Do you have a picture?" I asked. She nodded and went inside. She came back a minute later with a small framed photo. I looked at it. It was him. The same hat. The same kind eyes. The same smile. But there was one difference. In the photo, the man had a long, thin scar running from his ear down to his chin. "That's him," I whispered. "But he didn't have the scratch on his face." The woman let out a small sob. "He got that scar in the war. He had it his whole adult life. He was self-conscious about it. He used to say he wished he could just wipe it away." I backed away from the gate. I felt sick. "I have to go," I mumbled. I rode my bike home as fast as my legs would carry me. I put it in the garage and went straight to my room. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't tell anyone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Harold. I kept thinking about how real he looked. How he knew about my brother. And then, around 2 a.m., I woke up to a sound outside my window. "Hey, kiddo." It was his voice. Clear as day. Just on the other side of the glass. "Nice night for a race." I screamed for my parents. My dad ran outside with a flashlight, checking the bushes, checking the street. There was no one there. Just the empty sidewalk and the wind in the trees. The neighbors across the street moved out a few months later. New people moved in. They painted the house blue. They parked a minivan in the driveway. I never saw Harold again. But sometimes, when I drive through my old neighborhood, I still glance at that driveway. And I wonder, if I had accepted his challenge to race, would I have come back? Or would I have followed him to wherever he was going? I guess I'll never know. And honestly, I don't want to.
Think you're brave enough to handle what comes next? Prove it. Hit subscribe to Nightmare right now. Let's see how long you last.